Hey guys, this is On Fire Fitness, and I'm your host, Mitch Stokes. Today we have two special guests with us. We have Coach Tiffany Cresswell-Yeager and Coach Nick Adams here, both formerly from Blue Mountain. They're Blue Mountain graduates here in Wilkesburg, Pennsylvania. Recently, Nick took a coaching and teaching position over at Hamburg School District. But we invited him on the show. We wanted to talk about this subject matter and hopefully shed some light on some misconceptions, things to do, things not to worry about, things that are out of your control largely, and hopefully give you a better perspective on how to go about this whole journey. Tiff, I want you to talk first. Go ahead and explain your background, talk about your coaching background, your education background, and all that.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Mitch. Thanks for having us. So I have spent about 20 years in higher education. I have been involved in admissions and enrollment management and supervised athletics for almost a decade, as well as been coaching track and field since 2002.
Wow.
Do you want me to say more about my education?
Yes.
Okay, so I have an undergraduate degree from Penn State in journalism, a master's in training and development from Penn State, and also a PhD in leadership and administration.
So what led you into that? Why did you get involved?
Why did I get involved in track or my education? Okay, why did I get involved in track? I think actually it's really a funny story. I was having lunch at Amato's. Do you remember Amato's? Mm-hmm. And ran into Coach Yak, who had been one of my coaches and a longstanding track coach at Blue Mountain, and asked me if I was interested in getting more involved. And I had been an athlete at Blue Mountain. I played 3 sports 25 years ago and thought it would be fun to get involved in coaching.
And how about the education?
Why did I do that?
Yeah.
So I always felt more of a scholar than an athlete, but I thought both were really important, and I wanted to work at a college and university, and education obviously is really important in that field.
Okay. And Coach Adams?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I, like Blue Mountain graduate, like you said earlier, went to Arcadia University as my undergrad. Just recently finished up my master's at Alvernia University. A high school teacher for a couple of years at Blue Mountain, went to the middle school at Hamburg. I'm thinking about this question about why I got involved with coaching, and it's an interesting one to think about because I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I think, I was around football my whole life, playing when I was in high school, and, certainly had a passion for the sport, watching it and playing it. And, I think after I graduated from college, I wanted to find some way to connect with the sport. Obviously, there's not very many adult football leagues out there where you can put pads on and just, smash face against some other dudes.
Not always a good idea either.
Yeah. So, I think it was like 2012 or 2013. I just took a volunteer position with the Blue Mountain varsity football team, just trying to get my feet wet and try to understand the game from a different perspective. Coach Cresswell was kind enough to let me help out with the track and field program as well. So I was kind of around athletes for a couple of years now, and as I continued to coach, I realized that it was something I really enjoyed, and it was totally different from playing, but still let you be a part of the sport. So I thought that was. And
can I add? I think the first time a kid calls you coach,
yeah,
you're like, I like this. I want to do this more.
That's funny because I felt awkward when they started doing that. Coach Stokes just sounded strange.
But you feel like you have influence then.
Oh, you do. You don't realize how much you do necessarily right off the bat.
Right.
I think you think about who your coaches were and how important they were in your development.
Huge.
And, I think Coach Cook said something really interesting when we were at States watching his daughter compete about how not only are you hoping to develop better athletes, but better people. And I think that's an important piece of coaching.
Absolutely. Yeah. Getting started in athletics and getting involved with that. I was only, I think it was like 27 or 28. How old were you, Tiff, when you started coaching?
24.
Yeah, I remember you were pretty young.
Yeah, I was right out of college, and I had just started working at Penn State Schuylkill, and was actually there. That's how I ran into Yak. I was picking up pizzas for an activity at the campus.
Yeah, and I was 23 as well.
Yeah.
So I think people who are athletes their whole lives and want to continue to be around the game.
Yeah,
it's
natural
a great.
progression.
Yeah, it's sort of.
It makes sense. Not necessarily everyone's the right fit. There's plenty of people that were great athletes out there that not necessarily wonderful coaches.
Yeah,
especially if they didn't have to work. If you don't have to work at something, it's a little bit different. For those of us that had to work just to be somewhat mediocre or slightly better than that, we understand the struggle and patience in teaching how to move and teaching an event, especially track and field. There's a lot of moving parts there. But I enjoy it. I'd like to eventually get back into it when I have more time on my hands again, but for now I've stepped away from that. So what I wanted to talk about was the athletic scholarships. I got a lot of kids, a lot of parents really. The kids don't really have a choice about it. It's usually a father or mother or both that come to me, and they want to train in a private facility because they feel that's what the kid needs, not necessarily to be more competitive on the field, but be competitive as a recruit. They're chasing that potential scholarship, and I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong in giving your kid the best opportunity possible to be the best they can be. I mean, that's why I'm here. But I've also seen it go on the unhealthy end of the spectrum, where there's too much focus on it, and they have unrealistic expectations. And I wanted to get your guys' insight on the whole process.
Well, I think you talk about parents kind of driving their kids and wanting to find those edges to be competitive in the recruiting process and in college at the next level. But I think, interestingly enough, Coach Cresswell and I have been talking about this and almost throw some water on this idea of a scholarship. We saw that 2% of college athletes or high school athletes become college athletes. So, you're already making your pool of possibilities extremely small. And I think we also talked earlier before about the student athlete themselves having to really want to do that at the next level rather than just their parents pushing them. I think parent support is absolutely crucial. I think parents can be an excellent motivator and provide guidance when necessary. But I think at the end of the day, when students are deciding on what they want to do, if they want to play at the next level, it becomes almost like a job, and you have to have that sort of individual, unique passion to really go after and play sports at the next level. But having said that, I think there are a lot of good opportunities for parents to get involved and know what the process is and do their research to help their children out and getting to the next level.
And I think for me, I just want to reiterate a couple of things that Coach Adams said, but to start with, looking at the motivation for why the parent wants the scholarship, to understand, is it about the cost of college? And that's probably another issue for another day, about how expensive it is and how parents are looking to finance it in any way they can. And with that, being realistic, like we said, 2% of high school athletes become college athletes on a scholarship. That it means the truly elite are the ones going to actually chase or catch that scholarship. So that being realistic and understanding, but also being able to put in, having the student athlete be able to put in the work and be ready for what it looks like on the other side of high school. And that it is a time commitment and a physical commitment, and they need to be aware. A lot of high school athletes, some of the best high school athletes that I have coached or been around, haven't really enjoyed the college athletic process because they felt like their love of the sport was changing because of how difficult the practice schedule and the travel schedule and their course schedule was. And I think I want to add too, the academic piece is so important, right? Kids are going to college to find a major and a degree, to get a job, to find a career, to be a professional.
The best one possible.
Yeah. And that fit is really important. And I've known kids to choose colleges based on where their sports are offered, but major in something that they didn't actually want to do. And so there's some danger in that as well.
Yeah, certainly. And I've coached athletes who have been, C and D level athletes in high school and have excelled extremely well on the field, but they just didn't meet those academic standards, and the NCAA is not going to compromise in any way.
No, especially now
in academics. I mean, they have sliding scales. They have all their stuff on their website. Details are all. I mean, it's very explicitly written exactly what they're looking for in a student athlete.
And it's pretty stringent for Division One.
Yeah, absolutely.
From what I remember, we went to a conference that they held over at the high school a couple years ago.
Yeah, it's a 2.3 GPA.
Yeah.
And high schools use different models for their GPA, but you have to talk to your guidance counselor and have that submitted to the eligibility center on the NCAA's website. So they're looking for a minimum of 2.3 for Division One. I think it's a little less for Division 2 and 3, maybe a 2.2. But
but not by a whole lot.
No, it's not like you're looking at a D average.
A little wiggle room, and that's
correct.
And I think too. So if talking about Division One athletes, it's important to think about planning early and making sure that your academic achievement is on par with those qualifications, because it would be terrible to be the excellent elite athlete and then have your academic standard subpar.
Yeah, and when Coach Cresswell says early, she means early, as early as your freshman year. They're looking at those courses in ninth grade immediately.
Absolutely. I had a couple conversations over the years with kids, and I was thinking about going to college and wrestling and doing that. I'm like, well, you're already in your junior year, and you're telling me that you failed a class.
Yeah.
Like, you need to get on it now. Like, go talk to your guidance counselor and go talk to your teacher. Like, hey, this is what I want to do. I have a hard time in this specific subject, but I'm willing to work. Like, you have to. Teachers generally in high school will work with you if they know that you have a hard time and they know that you're trying to do something outside of there beyond, just graduating high school.
Right.
If you put the time in, this is what I tell the kids, if you put the time in and you tell them that you actually care, the teacher more than likely, they're going to care that much more. They'll meet you halfway.
Yeah, so you need to have 12 passing core classes by the end of your junior year.
Yeah.
Obviously your English, math, social studies, and science times 3 adds up to your 12, and they want NCAA wants 16 by the end of your graduating year.
Well, and even I think it's important, I know we're talking a lot about scholarship, but it's important to think about Division III athletes, because that's where a lot of our students will apply. And there are no athletic scholarships in Division III, but a lot of times, I think, what did it say, 80% of student athletes in Division III will have an academic or need-based scholarship.
Yeah.
But I think they amount to like $11,000. So it doesn't cover the cost.
It might cover a semester or a half a semester,
Right.
depending on what the tuition is.
But it's important for those athletes to understand that their admission standard is the same as the general student applicant, and that there are no easy ways through the admissions process, that they have to meet the standard of 4 years of math, and they have to take the SAT and all of those pieces.
Or ACT, depending on where you live.
Yeah. So on top of doing the extra training, and people get their pitching coach, and then they have their hitting coach. They drive out to Jersey, they drive out to Delaware. They're all over the place, spending tons of money, thousands of dollars a year on a kid that's maybe 12. But you never hear about them. Like, well, and he also has a math tutor. You don't really hear that.
Yeah.
And that's really what they should be doing.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Especially if you have a kid that wants to go to a military academy. Mm-hmm. Like you said, that starts freshman year. You need to be ready to go and already thinking about submitting letters and making sure that you have your courses in line. Like, what are you taking? Are you taking, basic classes, or are you in AP classes? Mm-hmm. Are you honors?
Yep.
Are you doing those things?
And
are you in other extracurricular activities besides just sports? Do you want to see that?
Yep, and I think that's we opened the show with talking about what the parents' influence is, and I think that's where parents really need to step in. I work with 8th graders, and some of those guys don't even know how to organize their folders. These are A and B students that do well in classes.
Chronological order, people.
But they struggle with some of those soft skills, and I think that's where parents really can step in and try to talk to their student athletes about what their plans are for the future.
Yeah, but it's not your job. It's not their job. That's why they pay taxes to the school. I hear
That's another topic for another day, right?
So it was a recent school board election, and I'm not a resident of Orgersburg, but I do watch the borough page, and there's always a lot of complaining throughout the year. A lot of what I hear is, why do I have to pay taxes for the school? I don't have any kids in there anymore, and I don't have any kids. I never had any. For one, so personal responsibility of the parents. Yes. The state's job is to educate your kid, but we only have them for a couple hours a day. Just like sport coaches only have them for 2 hours a day. Mm-hmm. You're in charge of them for the rest of their lives. The first 18 years, you have to take some ownership of that and not just throw your hands up and go, well, the teachers are supposed to be doing that, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the things that's difficult, too. I read today Division II athletes, which is another place where you get a lot of students, but the NCAA website said that a majority of Division II athletes are first-generation college students, and that's another area of challenge for students. There's a lot of obstacles to overcome when you're a first-gen college student. when your parents didn't go to college and don't know the processes, you're less likely to have planned early or to figure out what the process looks like for academics or financial aid.
And yeah, I just want to jump in too. I'm just thinking as we're going through and speaking about some of these kind of content-specific words, all this information can be found on NCAA's website too. And we're bringing up Division I, II, and III. And if you are a parent who's not really familiar with these kind of rankings as well, I mean, Division I is the more popular schools that we would see on a TV, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, Florida, something like that, or pretty common larger schools. So, if you have a couple schools in mind that you would like your child to go to NCAA's website and you can find what classification they're in.
Yeah.
Right. And your Division II schools around here are your state system schools like Kutztown and Millersville.
Depending on what sport we're talking about, too.
Yeah,
certainly.
True, yeah.
And like Lockhaven, I believe, is still Division I wrestling.
Okay.
And I don't know what's going on with the track program.
Yeah, they can be dependent on sport, but Division III are your small privates, and those schools cannot offer athletic scholarships. And then you also have your junior college division, because there's a lot of local athletes that go to junior college for 2 years before.
And it's a good opportunity if you do want to. I mean, obviously you're not going to get scholarships, but you have an opportunity to stay playing and stay on the field and stay on the mat, do whatever it is that you want to do if they offer that, if that's what you want to do.
Absolutely, and I think some student athletes will use that avenue as a way to work on the academic side following high school. Obviously, we all mature and learn differently at different speeds, and if high school was a struggle for you, sometimes the junior college can prep you to get those academic standards that are necessary to get into the NCAA requirements. And we're talking a lot about NCAA, and I think that's the most popular format for students to use. But there are, non-associated NCAA schools where you can play sports. There's a great deal, a great many of them. So I don't think we can spend time listing them. But NAIA, as Coach Cresswell mentioned, is another good opportunity. Their academic standards are a little bit less, and they do provide some resources and financial aid for their students too.
Well, I think it's an important point for any of your local listeners to know that Penn State Schuylkill is transitioning to NAIA.
Yeah.
And some of the Penn State campuses are involved in the USCAA, but some are Division III schools. So there are different opportunities even locally.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good stepping stone, too, if a kid wants to do 2 years at a local campus, stays active.
Jersey,
and then, hey, maybe he goes to main campus down the road and he decides, I'm done with the athletics. I had fun for the first 2 years at my smaller campus, satellite campus, and now I know what major I want to do. They've kind of figured it out, what direction they want to go in.
Yeah.
I'm pulling up some notes that I took that recruiting seminar that Coach Stokes and I attended. The NAIA, a little bit easier on the GPA, 2.0 instead of 2.3 if you're looking at compared to Division I NCAA. Graduate in the top half of your class and a minimum of 860 on your SATs. So they're a little bit more lenient in the academic side.
Well, and I think it's important, I know the idea of scholarship is important to parents a lot of times because it helps to relieve the burden of tuition, but I think the athlete needs to be realistic and think about where they want to play and compete, because the Division III level or the Penn State campus level or the community college level offers that opportunity to stay on the field, to stay on the court, and do recruit. They go out and their coaches recruit, and they participate in highly competitive athletics throughout the year.
Absolutely. Nick, do you want to talk about, as far as the recruiting goes and kids putting together basically like a recruiting profile for these coaches? I mean, a lot of people don't know anything about that. They think that if the kid plays well and he does all these things, the coach just shows up. And sometimes that happens if you're at the right school, if you're at a large school that's known for putting players out. Like if you're at a Permian High in Texas, yes. But not necessarily, backwoods
Local.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, exposure is really key to being able to expose your child to the college coaches. So a lot of schools are using a program called Huddle, HUDL. I love it. Yeah, you can use it for football. You can use it for basketball. And what I've done with student athletes is kind of put together a recruiting profile like Coach Stokes has talked about. And you can do this not through Huddle. You can simply, use your Apple Movie Maker, just have some sort of package, some sort of package to be able to send to coaches. Parents and student athletes should know that they can contact colleges at any time, at any point, if they have a specific school in mind. Anyway, in this package, typically we've always encouraged student athletes to put their height and weight. Sometimes it comes down to being bigger and faster, or just having the proper size for position. And it's especially important in football. It's especially important in basketball. But the real realization is that some coaches are looking for a certain type, a body build. I was going to say,
we talked about that with track too. There is a body type for specific events that coaches might be looking.
Yeah, is that phenotype like, oh, okay, this kid is a little raw, but they have the potential to move really well down the line if they go to this school, and I get a hold of them and I'm coaching them. I can get them from 130 on a javelin to 160 their freshman year, because they've been around the sport long enough they can see that.
Yep. So I mean, that's if I'm making a mental checklist in my head, I'm making sure that I include that in their package to send to coaches. What I'll do next is sit down with the athlete and I'll find maybe the top 10 plays. And I'm not looking just in football for touchdowns, or if it's basketball, I'm not looking for slam dunks, or if it's ice hockey, it's not looking for just goals, but I want to find like team moments, and I want to find hustle plays too. A lot of coaches are looking at how their athlete responds when the cards are going against them. It's very easy to put together a highlight film when you're up 49-0.
Yeah.
So I'm finding I'm sitting down with the athlete and finding maybe top 10 of those plays. And then the other thing too is I'm including their academics. I know we spoke about that before. They want to see right there on the highlight film, open and honest about what their class rank is, what their GPA is, and be prepared, student athletes and parents, to send a full game to this college. So they want to see, like I said, what do you do when it's the fourth quarter and your team's up, or what do you do when you've been on the field for 25 minutes, or you've played for an extended amount of time. So those are the kind of packages that I'm putting together with a letter of interest to send to college admissions, and try to get yourself more exposed. Be a businessman. Run your recruiting process like a business, like a social media presence.
Branding,
your marketing,
branding and marketing. You got to create a brand.
You're trying to stand out, and your high school coach can help you with that. I don't think it's their number one job, because a high school coach is trying to develop young men and women and be better people and figure out how athletics works into the bigger goal of life. But they can certainly have some of those connections. You get a former coach that maybe played at Bloomsburg or played at a Penn State or something and has some connections, but I don't think it's their number one job to try to get you exposed. I think you run your own marketing campaign and put yourself out there.
Let's talk about that marketing real quick. One of the phenomenons I've seen in the last couple of years is coaches dropping kids, early commits and that because of the things that they see on their social media. Yeah,
really great point. I think Coach Cresswell could maybe answer this better, since she's, kind of worked with admissions and seen it from the college end. What are the types of things do you think that people are looking at on the social media stuff?
Well, I think, it's dangerous, right? You have to be really careful of what your presence looks like, and there's a really fine line and balance between freedom of expression and offensive speech or memes. I think I'm trying to think of some of the examples we've seen recently where they dropped. Last year was a Division I recruit that was dropped based on I don't remember what they posted about, but it was considered a negative by the coach, and I think those things are being looked at. So the way you handle your experiences, the way you speak to about your teammates, about your coaches, about your parents. I think wasn't there's just a local lawsuit related to a girl's Snapchat.
Yeah. Honestly, from my perspective, I don't like to be controlling of a kid, as they progress in adulthood, but you could do your kid a favor and just get rid of it. If they're going to have an account, like an Instagram account or something like that, I would manage it myself. They can get on it if they want, but if you want to use it for like marketing the kid to coaches, because they do look at that stuff, I would get rid of the Facebook and all those other avenues, like really sanitize it. Don't give your kid the opportunity to screw it up,
right?
So to speak, because even a good kid does something stupid every once in a while, and the last thing you need, because everyone's got a camera now.
Yeah, the maturity that's needed for a social media brand and market is probably beyond high school years.
Yeah. And going along with that marketing too, just remember, this could be good advice for student athletes and for parents. The more you put yourself out there, the more you're going to be exposed to criticism and critique, and unfortunately, that's kind of the world that we live in. So, just kind of be prepared for internet heroes to maybe.
Hey, you're opening the door.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think too, just the level of competition. When you said put yourself out there, I was thinking about travel ball and all of those things that
true.
Some of the athletes will go to. What are the baseball things? The weekend?
The showcases.
Yes. When you go further out and your world is bigger, you're going to see bigger competition, and sometimes that can be really intimidating.
Yeah, and that's a double-edged sword as well. I know there's a lot of money in the travel showcases in baseball and AAU programs in basketball and travel soccer and all those types of things, and they get a bad rep sometimes from high school coaches because a lot of times their athletes are gone in the summer and off season. But there's benefits to it as well, to be exposed to better competition, to see where you stack up against.
Yeah.
And in a lot of those times, you might have some college coaches show up at some of those showcases or those tournaments because they have to see a great deal of talent in one area, and it's just easier for them. So a lot of college coaches have limits on when they're able to contact recruits. There's in every sport an evaluation period, a contact period, a silent period, and a dead period. And it's dependent on what sport you're in and what month it is. It's all different for all different levels. But if a coach is in an evaluation period, they're not able to talk to their athletes. So maybe a good opportunity for them would be to go to one of those showcases. So I'm not promoting them, but I'm not saying that
people should be aware that they're out there.
Yeah.
But to be aware of the positive and negatives with that. And I think too, something else that is helpful for parents to look up is on the NCAA website and many websites, you can look at the number of scholarships that are available in the sport, and that I think is really helpful to know. So if there's only 2 scholarships on the swim team, you should be aware that you're competing for those 2 spots. So.
One of the things that I try to tell fathers of young girls is when they're looking for something like that, we were thought about maybe getting in track and field. I'm like, good. Get them throwing javelin or pole vault or something, like an event that isn't as heavily sought after, I guess. Kids, it's just not sexy to throw a shot put when you're a 16-year-old girl. But there's a lot of resources out there if you get them throwing decently, and a decent-sized kid, they're strong. I don't want to say it's easier, but there's more available out there, I feel like. And it's something that gets lost on people. They get focused on the soccer.
Right.
And the basketball, and people completely forget about track and field.
Yeah, basketball is actually one of the most difficult sports in the country to get a scholarship to, percentage-wise.
There's so few athletes on the
few
court.
athletes can get a scholarship in basketball. Track and field's a great one. We looked up the ice hockey one, right?
Yeah, you actually have more likely to get a scholarship in ice hockey than
any ice
any
hockey
other.
fans out there?
Sign me up.
Yep.
That's funny. I did not know that. That makes sense, huh?
But like each school has so many scholarships that they can give, and they typically have, even in track and field, they have certain events that are more likely to have scholarship dollars in. And really, when you're thinking about it, it makes a lot of sense to focus on academics and athletics, because you are likely to be able to get an academic scholarship as an athlete than you are to get an athletic scholarship as an athlete.
Makes sense. Yeah. Now, your personal experiences, like coaching kids and seeing them successfully get there. I mean, obviously, we're not going to use names necessarily. You don't have to, but just some, what would you call it? Some experience, personal experience.
I've only been around football. We've had a couple kids from Blue Mountain go play at the next level, and I think it's been a rewarding experience from the coaching end of it because, it's really nice to see that you've been a mentor and an influence in a student-athlete's life. The process has been relatively easy, I think, for some of the Division III and II athletes that we've seen. They often put together the recruiting package, film and letter and stuff. Usually talk to their head coach, send that stuff out to the schools, and the schools have, when I say schools, the colleges, universities have come to visit the high school, interview the kids, sit down with them, and just. I kind of lost my track of thought there where I was trying to go with that, but I think they've come in, they've interviewed with the kids, and you try to be the best mentor you can be. in trying to guide them and what's best for them. We mentioned a couple things about is it the right fit for you? Are you going there just for the sports? Is the environment nice? How's the student population? Is the location okay? And you just try to give them the best advice you can. We've had athletes that have played all over the state. Couple have gone and dropped out and realized it wasn't for them. We've seen some stats that say that some athletes spend just as much time on their sport in the off season as they do in season, as far as weight training is concerned, nutrition, sports psychology, academics, tutoring, film evaluation. So some students have not been able to handle it at that level, and that's totally fine. I mean, you kind of realize that it's just not for you. And we've had other students that have stuck with it and graduated, and it's a huge achievement. It's a pride for the school that you work at, or the pride for the high school. And I think I'm second guessing my thought about the process of it being easy in the recruiting cycle. I suppose it's not so easy when you're trying to make one of those kind of lifelong decisions for where you want to play.
I have a question for maybe you both, but do you think, because I think a lot of our athletes tend to go to similar places, so when the coaches become familiar with a program, they seem to be likely to come back to, like, Blue Mountain baseball or Blue Mountain football for certain athletes, and it seems like locally there are places where it is maybe an easier process.
Yeah, true, because you have some of those connections and some of those inroads. And I think that goes back to the exposure kind of segment we were talking a little bit about. And I think, if you have a couple athletes that go to a school that are kind of big time, maybe a student athlete goes to a Kentucky, or maybe a student athlete goes to a Penn State, and those college coaches, if there's not as much turnover in the college coach realm, they can kind of look and say, oh, okay, I'm familiar with Blue Mountain or a Pottsville or Schuylkill Haven. They're able to produce this type of athlete. So yeah, absolutely. I think that consistency between head coaches, both at the high school level and the college coaches at college level, can kind of make that process a little bit easier. But you're not hemmed in by that either. You're not limited. And the more exotic you want to get, or the farther away you want to get, it goes back to that kind of marketing aspect.
I would say, as far as you talking about turnover with coaches, for me, as a parent, down the line, if my kid ends up in that seat, and I have a cousin of mine, his daughter is in, she just finished her freshman year at track and field over at Indiana, did really well. They were supposed to look at Penn State. It didn't happen because of the weather, and they just never showed up, and then she fell in love with Indiana. But what I'd be looking at as far as like a visit, unofficial or official, and I'm talking to coaches, is the culture. As an athlete and as a parent, do I want my kid, or do I want to be, as an athlete, a part of that culture? If you walk in and you don't get a good feeling, yeah, it's got a good name behind it. It's a big school and it's got all this clout. But if you don't feel like you fit, you just don't like it, don't force it. Yeah, you'll find somewhere where you fit and you feel comfortable.
Yeah, it's going to make playing sports a lot harder if you are not cool with the people you live with and study with, and the library is boring or whatever.
And
like
I
all
think
those extra
you have
pieces.
You have to look deeply to see the culture on a recruiting visit, because you're getting the best of whatever's happening. So I think it's important to figure out, to follow social media, to look things up as parents and as athletes about what the university's really like.
Look
what
up
is
the
it,
newsreels.
What is it known for?
There's a crime constantly outside.
Well,
Are people getting knifed in the parking lot?
These are all important components. And So I'm a Penn State grad. I worked at Penn State for 17 years. I've got a lot of blue and white pride. And, Coach Adams will look at me and say, but think about all these things that have happened. And I don't see it. I'm part of that organizational culture that didn't see the problems. But you want to be aware of what the coaching philosophy is, what the educational philosophy is. And I believe in that educational mission.
Some student athletes are a little bit... They receive the short end of the stick in the recruiting process too. I'm thinking about the visits and the culture and stuff at the programs at the universities level. I think Division II and Division III athletes can take an unlimited number of unofficial visits. Yeah. So you're paying for this process out of pocket. Don't quote me on the official visit number. Typically it's 3, but each sport can be a little bit different. But thinking about the culture that the sports program and the university has too can also change. And I think we've seen some horror stories in the news where kids have entered into a contract with a college, has signed a national letter of intent, and the coach leaves to go to another school, and now you're kind of stuck. And unfortunately, student athletes don't have that bargaining chip where they can get out of it as easily. I mean, it's a contract that kind of only goes one way. And I think there are some students at universities around the United States that are trying to unionize and try to change that aspect.
They absolutely should.
Which I'm on board with it as well. I think those players, especially at the higher levels, profit for their universities. But
the profit, like Penn State, Ohio State, all these bigger schools, Oregon, the amount of funds that they make. Now I understand that they're getting a free education, but I think it's really imbalanced. And then the kid gets in trouble, or the coach gets in trouble because he accepts money or something.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that they should be paid outright, but maybe a stipend at the end, like they get a savings account, and that stipend goes into a savings account that they can't touch until they graduate. Something. Some kind of collateral for compensation for really, think about the money that's made at each game, selling jerseys and all the wear and all that. I mean, they make, I don't even know what they make in a game. Just by ticket sales alone.
Well, I was going to say, the TV contracts are typically where the money is in Division I football and basketball.
Yeah, it's huge numbers, and they kind of leverage student athletes, athletics against them and profit off their back. So, I think they should be fairly compensated. But I know we're talking about a very small percentage of students, but all students are going to have to enter into that contract with their college at some point. So, going back to the culture piece of it, you just got to be aware of those types of things. You got to know what's going on. And I would think if you're on those unofficial visits, I would ask your head coach and your assistant coaches, what are their plans? Are you going to be here in 5 years? What do you see, in the program in the next 5 years as my son or daughter embarks on a big decision in their life? And are you going to be around? Do you have a family atmosphere? Are you going to be a mentor? Are you, ask those kind of tough questions, and be prepared to field those answers.
Yeah. I think one of the other things I wanted to say about the idea of talking to your coaches about being flexible, right? Like, so many of the athletes that we've coached have gone thinking they're going to do one thing and end up being at a different position, playing a different sport even, but based on that sort of moldable body type. And
that happens a lot with track and field.
I even think football, in terms of positioning.
Positions change, but also as the athlete matures, you'll have a guy that runs an 800. Oh, I'm an 800. I'm like, you're running the 1600 now. Yeah. Like, you're running a mile.
Well, and the decathlon was something that a lot of our athletes have ended up doing because they might have been more universal or
they're well
flexible.
Rounded. Yeah, absolutely. And you need to be open to that as an athlete and be like okay with that. Like, okay, the coach obviously sees something there and they want me here. And that's my struggle with a lot of high school athletes too is we're asking you to do something, just do it. It's for the team's benefit and we think that you're a good fit. Jump on it.
Yeah, listen to your coaches.
They know better. They've been around a while. Jump on the opportunity and just see where you excel because you probably will if you buy into it.
Work hard.
But another thing I want to talk about is we were talking about things to do. This is how you go through the process and all that. The focus on the travel ball and the travel teams and all that stress and all that focus and I think it's a really big. I could very easily be a bit of a chicken hawk and go after these parents. It's like, well, if you want a scholarship, you need to come train here with me. It's the last thing that I say. I think you'll do better. We can help improve your performance, but not necessarily at a Division I level. We talked about, the kid has to have some natural ability to begin with. But I feel like a lot of these private organizations really go after these families and they sell those guarantees and if every single athlete that they touched and that they guaranteed to these parents they were getting a scholarship, I'm like, where are these kids? Man, we're really turning them out.
We spent 40 minutes talking about scholarships, and I think we need to be hesitant of anyone who's guaranteeing a scholarship for student athlete or exposure here. And throughout the 40 minutes that we've been speaking, not once did we say you had to find a athletic advisor of some kind to guide you in the process, or some head honcho at an AAU tournament that's going to get you exposed. I mean, I think if you
those
follow...
people are out there, and just the whole college admission scandal, I think we need to be weary. You need to do your investigation if you're going to find one of those people.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, I maybe I'm being a bit too independent here, but I think you can handle this process within family or within school district or within coaches and be just as successful as, someone who is hitting every camp and has some, big wig who is managing this athlete in the process. An athlete that I'm familiar with in the area had some of that going on throughout the process, and it was a touchy relationship, and when I say touchy, not physically, obviously, but to be quite honest, it was a bit strange to manage this 16, 17-year-old kid while he's going through this process. In terms of like contact, and we brought up social media before, and here's this grown person that's contacting this adolescent through social media,
inviting them to camps and
inviting them to stuff. I mean, private parties and driving places, and it just, maybe it was.
As parents, be wary of those kinds of things.
I mean, maybe it was from the best spot or from the best intentions from this guy, but I just. Just be
as a
do
rule,
research.
I when I do talk to a kid or I give my number out, I've met the parents already. We have a relationship, like a coach, parent, athlete relationship. That's different. When reaching out like that is a bit strange. Like, I wouldn't want somebody reaching out to my kid out of the blue and I don't even know about it.
Sometimes I feel like they're like promoters, party promoters, club promoters, but they do camp promotion, and it feels sometimes a little bit.
They want to fill the seats.
Sure, because at the end of the day, I mean, it's big money.
Business.
Sports is money. I mean, there's a lot of money to be made, even with promises that your kid could be the next LeBron James or whatever athlete.
And I think the other side of that is there are legitimate counselors out there that do career and academic counseling for parents to help them guide them in this process, but there are resources that don't cost money.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time up, but I just wanted to open up the floor for anything else that you guys want to talk about, stories, little anecdotes.
I don't know if I have any good stories.
You want me to tell my
tell
professional
yours.
Story?
Yeah, that was good. I like that one.
Well, I said when we were talking about like negative experiences or positive experiences in thinking about this, and so I supervised both admissions, financial aid, and athletics when I was at one of the campuses, and we had to make calls sometimes on when the coaches wanted to do recruitment. So the coaches recruited. There was no athletic scholarships, but sometimes there was need-based institutional support. And there was a coach that wanted to recruit this young woman, and at the campus they give a predicted GPA, and that's the predicted score that you may have after your first semester. And this young woman's predicted GPA was a 198, 195. So she was predicted to fail. That's what the campus predicted. And so she could come, we could admit her provisionally so that she could come for a semester, and then she would be ineligible because of her predicted GPA, but she could potentially, if she did well, play the next spring semester, play this during the spring.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of ethical decision making involved in this process, because we'd be taking her money. She was out of state, which the tuition would be $35,000 a year for
easy money.
Yeah. And we could provisionally admit her. The coach wanted to admit her, and I remember sitting down with the director of admissions and the athletic director and saying, talk to me about the issues here. She's predicted to fail. This doesn't look good. Her high school GPA was horrendous, and I felt really ethically torn to say, I don't think we should admit this student because it doesn't feel good to take their money. And there's so much going on about college debt and taking on students that can't succeed.
Yeah.
And my athletic director really wanted to admit her. And I said, I'm going to leave this up to you. And he chose to provisionally admit her. And this is where I will always remember this story, because I was wrong. She ended her first semester with a 3.4 GPA.
Wow.
She ended up being able to play and doing really, really well on the team. And then she decided after her first year to leave, go to boot camp. She enrolled in the National Guard in order to get her tuition paid for her next so many years. And so that's a success story of giving someone a chance. And the athletic director wanted to give her a chance. She wanted to play. I said, but again, we as administrators and coaches and athletic directors, we have to be aware of all of those pieces that go into that
And
process.
what was you think the missing piece there was for her?
Support.
She didn't have the support of the environment.
Right.
And once she did,
right. And I think
she did well.
One of the things we didn't talk about, and I said where a lot of my experience is in supporting athletes after they enroll. So that's one of a really great thing about the college athletic experience is that at elite Division I schools, there are tons of resources for academic support, time management, academic advisors, personal counselors, career counselors that meet with the athletes on a regular basis. Even at the places that I've worked, there are support services, mandatory study halls, mandatory meetings that encourage the student athletes to be successful. And I think, again, I looked at the NCAA Division I graduation rate, and I think it was 80%. Typical college graduation rate, you're happy if it's 60%.
Wow.
50% at your community colleges in
Yeah,
terms
it
of
doesn't
retention.
surprise me, though, because, I'm in school right now, and sometimes the kids just don't show up. They call the name 3 weeks in a row, kid's just not there. Then he shows up 10 minutes late, the next time he's there, like, what are you doing?
Yeah, but your athletes are required to check in. They're required to go to study hall. They have academic advisors specifically for them. I know if you talk about University Park at Penn State, the Morgan Center is a best practice for the kinds of resources and support for student athlete. So I think that might be something else to think about in the admissions process is look at the resources and support for the student athlete after they are admitted.
What happens if they get hurt?
Yeah.
All that stuff.
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, Coach Stokes, I just want to thank you for letting us come on. Honestly, I think you're doing a great job with your training program, and I think this is a wonderful idea to expose this topic to people in the area. I think, having thought about this topic for the last couple of weeks since we've been asked to be on the show too, I think if you are driven, motivated, you can find a spot somewhere on the field, but it's got to be about you. And I'm talking to student athletes when I say that. It's your life. There's people that are going to want it for you. There's going to be people that don't want it for you. There's going to be naysayers. There's going to be positive support. There's going to be role models. But at the end of the day, I think you just have to spend time at night before bed and in the morning and in the shower and thinking about it. Is this something that I want for my life? And if it's a yes, a hard yes, then you can go get it. And if it's maybe, then you're going to struggle. You're going to have some ups and downs.
Well, and I think I want to add to that, let there be plan B. Right? Don't set yourself.
Absolutely.
Don't set yourself on one school and that's the only place I'm going to go and that's the only place I'm going to compete. But let your options be open and be aware of all that's out there. And being a student athlete can mean a lot of different things.
Absolutely. Yeah, you definitely want, and people, I've heard the mantra like, you don't plan Bs for losers and this and that. And anything you do, you got to have as a contingency plan. You need to have a fire exit, and for it to be landing on solid ground. Yeah, definitely.
And your decision making, so maybe it's not your first choice, but that doesn't make it a bad choice, and it doesn't mean it won't end up even better than what your first choice was.
Yep.
Yeah, sometimes we don't end up doing what we originally thought. I never thought I'd be sitting here doing this. I was going to.
Me neither.
I was going to go in the Navy, and then I was going to be a high school phys ed teacher, maybe a history teacher, and I'm sitting here doing this. So.
I don't know. I wanted to be a talk show host,
and
so I guess
all better off for it. This is
Yeah.
Coach Kressel's opportunity to be a talk show host.
Yeah.
And
There you go.
wanted a little banter.
we got a little banter going. Maybe I'll start my own podcast. Who knows?
It's never too late. You can do this literally with a phone.
Yeah.
There we go.
That's all you need. But I guess that about wraps it up. Now, within the next 2 weeks, we're going to have Coach Nikki Jatinsky on the show with a couple of our youth athletes from the Fearless Barbell training program, talking about their trip out to Youth Nationals out in Anaheim, California, coming up here at the end of the month of June. Should be interesting. This is the first time we're going to have some youngsters on the show.
That sounds great.
So it'll be fun.
Yep, I'll definitely be listening.
But I want to thank you two for coming on. I know you guys are busy people, but I knew that it would be good because you guys have really good heads on your shoulders. You have good perspective. You've been around a while doing this. And I wanted to kind of get it out there because it's something that I hear about all the time and I get asked questions about. And I'm not the best resource for it because I haven't really put that many kids out there. I'm always willing to help. Mm-hmm. But again, people just, they're focusing on the wrong things all the time. It's always, well, they need to lift more weights and do this and they need to play year round. I'm like, yeah. They also need to be well-rounded individuals. Mm-hmm. Psychologically, too. They need to be able to think about, okay, can they make decisions on their own when they go 1,000 miles away from home and they do get admitted to a school? Are they going to be able to handle that? And being away from home and being out from underneath your umbrella. There's all kinds of things that need to go on. And not being a helicopter parent and having those weird relationships with the coach, like let the coach and teach them some life lessons so that when they do, when we talked about when they get out there, are they better people? Mm-hmm. That's part of handling that college experience and not necessarily, I don't want to say a failure, but a major setback like getting in trouble. Mm-hmm. I mean, it happens to a lot to student athletes out there. When they have a better rounded head on their shoulders, that's less likely to happen. And I think when the focus is always on the scholarship and winning at all costs, you develop those bad attitudes, you develop those bad habits, and it carries with them when they go out there as young adults. They start screwing up. Well said. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Thanks, Coach. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me or you can reach out to either one of these two. I'm sure they'd be willing to help anybody out that has questions or concerns about their kid. Well, and I think that's something, too, I want to add. I always ask questions, right? So parents may not, or athletes may not, or even coaches may not know the answers, but ask someone like you or anyone you know who's gone through the process. Ask another parent. That social network is so important, social capital, where you can find someone who knows the answer. We are not experts in this arena, but yet we can find people who know the answers. And I think that referral is really important. Absolutely. Open your mouths. All right, guys. You guys have a good night. I'll see you in a few weeks. Leave comments in the section below. I wanted to say that so bad. Peace. All right, thanks. Later. Elvis Duran always does. Peace out, everybody.